before. Eric, the Norwegian lad, possessed a heart of fog, buried under a cold, narrow inlet of a soul. During his vagrant, long rambling from horizon to horizon, he scarcely suspected that the boreal, long winter bloodline that pounded in his temples was the song of a wanderer. During the longest month of the year he was born, in the fishing hut of tar and nets drenched by waves, born between the sea's miracle and the midnight sun, to an absent, shipwrecked father, now a swimmer among deep algae and sands startled by scales, gills, and fins. He was the fifth child born for the sea. Eric grew in its language of fishhook and current, force of the oar and simplicity of foam, just like all the boys of the beach, half Triton, half angel. But Eric didn't know a thing about it. Pulse of wind and stubbornness of the prow. He could barrel through the names of fish from headland to cape, and through the prayers of the channel and of the bay. At the age of 15, he could rattle off 1,000 gulfs, and not counting the already remote and breakish breast of motherland, yet not a single thought of Norway had set foot between his blonde eyebrows. During the annual caulking of boats, flames, filler ropes, and tar, Eric was 20 years of age and a virgin inside his oil-skin boots. And he believed children were born just like fishes during the still nights with the sea at rest. But his uncle, the helmsman, and long in the tooth recounted stories of islands with burnished and blue ports, where hundreds of naked women carried coal aboard, where green birds abounded, boiling with obscene words, and where at night the brothel flowered with a deep voice from conga drums. The uncle mumbled a distant song, awash with sun and coconut trees, in a tongue that couldn't be Norwegian, and which set off small whirls in Eric's pulse of wind. 22 years of age, Eric possessed a black and blue gaze, a damned soul, but a keel and rudder's will to reach the Isles of Sugar Mountains, where, as Uncle said, nights redolent with cedars smelled like rum barrels. Eric knew Norwegian sailors would always jump ship in the islands. When they wound up blind drunk, the captains would kick them down into the ship's filthy hold, where they would return to Norway thin, quiet, wane. With all of that, and a swift kick to the tail, Eric the sailor was on his way. Another before. This is not the lay of Eric after all is said and done, who by the age of 30 was no longer a sailor, but sold Norwegian herring in his Fort Liberté shop, whilst Madame Suki, Eric's wife, prayed to Legaba and Ogun for her white man, prayed in the cathedral for her blonde man. Madame Suki had once been Mademoiselle Sukiete, adrift as a virgin along the town's pier, made from midnight at all hours, with ice and a murky waning edge, a brothel's female cabin boy at anchor, a calcined ceramic containing a fountain core hymen preserved by Mamalua Clarice's amulet, effective for years in the deep navel's shadow. Eric loved Sukiete between bouts of fever, chills, and paleness, and he took quinine while gulping tafia to get the black girl out from under his skin, to chase her from his blonde head, to free himself from the arms and body basted with a polished and acrid odor of living bronze and drunken jungle. To think once more of his Norwegian beach with boats turned upside down like dead whales. But Sukiete loved him too much because he was white and blonde, and she exchanged Mamalua Clarice's amulet for the beating heart of a black hen, which Eric imbibed one Friday under the full moon with his tafia and quinine concoction. And soon thereafter a French bishop wedded them, whilst in the mountains Papalua Louis Pierre intoned the chant to Guinea and drank a white billy goat's blood. On a sweat-basted night of fevers and marshes, Eric, that sleepless sailor stranded on the cold and nocturnal flesh of Suki, was sowing his lineage grimed with hematosa and nostalgia deep into the fertile womb's hummus of his landlocked wife. And Eric died one fine day, teetering between Jesus Christ and Dambala Kedo. The wind's pulse expired in the sails of Sargasso's stranded boat. His soul-lacking compass flew towards Norway, where the memory was still ingrained of a white woman's foot leaving fragile prints in the sand. An after. And thus Yelida came into the world with a newborn's tender feline weeping. White milk spurted from Suki's black breasts, who flashed all her teeth and rejoiced in broken manner for the gift given to her by her blonde sailor. And Yelida was helpless among the rags, with her succulent clumsiness of roots and dreams. But she started to grow slowly like a wheat spike, black one day but not the next, white on the other days, with voodoo first name and family name ending in sen, language of Z's, iceberg heart, womb aflame, seaweed floating in her instincts, Norwegian wind imprisoned in the night's subsoil, with bonfires deaf to distant call for the rites, while others only harbored some hunch of impending danger. Suki guided her soul through the night roads of her womb, lit only by the tender mysteries of pollen, and she was fattened in the joyful pattern of her flaming daughter, from whose fate the rooster and the barn owl had no answer, nor did the wisest elders. The fish knew it, and the night, and the jungle, and the moon, and the hot weather, and the cold, and the claw soul of the swamp, and the God that entangled the roots and pushes them from the earth, and the male and female who in cemeteries ignite green fires on the frozen bellies of the dead, and the one residing in the throat of distant dogs, and the one filled with fear, a decapitated millipede. After all, this wants to be Yelida's story. Pressed key, sonorous flank, and the simple weight of a gaze, palette of wild woman, body of eternal youth, and serpent, renewed anew each new moon, complete, everlasting like the myth of the hermaphrodite during the dawn of the world. And when they dismembered the gods, subterranean riddle of resin and amber, cracked covenant of the golden rib, female's treason of time unchained. Parentheses. The Lilliputian children, snow gods, the old men dressed in red, shaking the mist from their beards, and those who blow on the aimless letters of the weather vanes, the inhabitants of embers, those of the howling wind, those who draw the Arctic auroras, the cotton and apple gods, who know the long south and short north, those who slip and play with flowers of ice on the timid and green life of the green moss, the Hyperborean elves of the sleigh and the reindeer heard the news in the language of hurricanes, distant and dissolved. Viking blood transfused from a male's sojourn to a woman's, into islands of snail and pepper. She was lost and left from her father's Arctic and floating archipelago ablaze, lost for good from its meek vegetation of prim pines, lost from the struggle of waves, oil, and fish, lost for good from Norway, condemned to the islands of fire. travelers through the deep underground paths adorned with tombs, where fossil dialogues with rotten root and bits of bone await the trumpet, and the secret of water churns dark, washing the insomniac pupils of the lost mineral through crevice and grotto and stratum. The gods of milk and cloud with the sex of a child, they sought the other god of thousand names, the black god of the Atubal and the Asigai javelin, feeding on men star-crusted with death, Angola of the graveyard and the thunder lording over the zombies, glistening gaze and the snakes. They sought Badargis, lethal low of stab and venom, spirit let loose among the reeds, where tafia is first flower and then honey, the father of resentment and anger, the one who burns down the hut upon the mere contact of his black hand and rapes all the girls in wombs of sleeping mothers. They sought Ague, pot-bellied god of water, half evaporated by the sun and embers, and half prisoner of the swamp, bored by the flies and waves in his house of winds and sponges. They sought Aida Kedo, she who is the one that ignites the red lamp of rape, the one that in the deep belly of the bongo maintains the 100 snakes crazed by pain and life. The one who on the night of Legba unleashes the dogs of desire, the Loa split in two by infinite sex, mistress of the sacred dance to reach her own self, the tamer of scream and spasm. Imploring, muted yet crying, and almost drunk from the island stench, the gods of Norway begged to save the last drop of Eric's blood, the Scandinavian innocence in a drop of blood. They spoke with the little blue eyes, while their blood thinned into molten silver, because Aida Kido danced during the rooster's crowing, her breasts sparkling with sweat and stars. For that night, Yelida had experienced her first lover. She was stretched out and fresh as a rain-drenched yellow leaf, sore without pain, almost awake in the hammock from a warm sleep, only a beloved beating of drum in her temples, and within her womb music and dance fell asleep. Along the paths of worm and ant, with all hope shattered, they returned. Another after, with spider's soul for the male accomplice of the spasm, Yelida, by way of her womb, she became the killer of wind, lost between the teeth of the grotto. There it was green and burning in moist humidity of fungus and lichen, hot like all that is hot, a thing like rotten leaf fermented in twilight, time made from a filter and rare word, in puddle of water with its greenness and larva and half-born wing and meteor's road. Yelida plucked yes and plucked no by a white's ecstasy and a black's frenzy, deep into the earth and high into the sky, in secret furrows and in mystic flames. Final. It will prove difficult to write Yelida's story on any